After a few years trying to steady the ship, WWE was really starting to turn things around in 1999, taking the vital steps that would see it eventually triumph in the Monday Night Wars. The company was aflush with new talent, gripping storylines, and enough bad language to give a vicar a heart attack. But what about the actual wrestling, you ask? You know, the whole reason we're here in the first place. With the decade, century, and millennium coming to a close, let's see if WWE said goodbye to them with a bang. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best WWE matches of 1999. Join us. Number 10, Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. The Undertaker at Fully Loaded. One of Steve Austin's first big programs as world champion in 1999 was against The Undertaker, whom he met in a very special main event at Fully Loaded. If the Texas Rattlesnake lost, he would not only lose the gold, but he would also be barred from challenging for it ever again. However, if he won, then Vince McMahon would be banished from WWE forever. That would never happen. This majority of the action in this first blood match was simple walking and brawling, but since this was the Attitude Era, nobody seemed to mind. The fans were more interested in characters and story, and oh boy was there plenty of that. X-Pac, Shane McMahon and Vince himself all tried to make Austin bleed, but were unable to stop the bionic redneck from cracking the dead man with a TV camera to produce some of the red stuff. After the bell rang, Triple H and The Rock also came down to join the madness, and the show went off the air with Austin giving the stunner to a dejected Vince. Not a technical masterpiece by any stretch, but exactly what this era of wrestling was all about. Number 9, The Rock vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 15. On one hand, WrestleMania 15 is one of the most important events in the history of WWE. On the other hand, it was a bit pants. The only match any of you should seek out, unless you want to see Bart Gunn's career end in 35 seconds, is the main event, the first of 3 Mania meetings between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Austin, the man of the people, was going up against the hand-picked corporate champion, with the scepter of Vince McMahon lurking in the background of a match that had been made no disqualification just hours earlier. You would be hard-pressed to find a boring Rock-Austin match, and this was no exception, as the two greatest rivals of the Attitude Era brawled across every single inch of available space. The announce table, the fans, the Mania sign, nowhere was safe from these rampaging beasts as they did their best to slay the other. After Vince McMahon interference and 3 different ref bumps, Mankind finally counted Austin the winner. This was far from their best work together, but still a hell of a lot of fun, even if Michael Cole accidentally spoiled the finish earlier in the night. Number 8, Test vs. Shane McMahon at SummerSlam. You know those old fantasy stories about brave knights challenging each other to win the heart of a fair maiden? Well, this is the closest that WWE ever got to that. In 1999, a young Stephanie McMahon was in a kayfabe relationship with Test, much to the annoyance of her brother Shane. This led to a match between the two at SummerSlam. If Test won, then Shane would leave the couple alone, but if he lost, then he and Steph would have to break up for good. These cartoony stakes fed into what was a very cartoony match, which began with Shane's running buddies, the Mean Street Posse, making their way to ringside. Sure enough, just a few seconds later, Test lobbed McMahon into his mates, which was absolutely hilarious. The match, which was dubbed a Greenwich Street Fight, was wild and crazy fun, complete with one of the first instances, perhaps the very first instance, of Shane hitting his famous elbow drop from the top rope through the announce desk. After some help from Patterson and Briscoe of all people, Test defeated his prospective brother-in-law to win the match and, most importantly, win Stephanie's heart. And they all lived happily ever after. Number 7, The Rock vs. Mankind at Royal Rumble. Get used to hearing about The Rock and Mick Foley, because their feud from the early days of 1999 produced some of the year's most compelling television. At the Royal Rumble, Mankind was going in as the reigning WWE champion, defending against the Brahma Bull. This was an I Quit match, which presented a major issue for Dwayne. How do you force a man who gets thrown into thumbtacks for fun to say the words I quit? Cue one of the most brutal matches of the entire Attitude Era, as Rock went to all sorts of extremes to get his opponent to say uncle. This is the match where Foley took 11 unprotected chair shots to the head in front of his wife and kids, as chronicled in Beyond the Mat, but he also sustained plenty more punishments, including getting thrown off a ladder onto an electric box which exploded. I mean, sure, why not traumatize those poor kids some more? Rock eventually had to cheat to win, playing a recording of Foley saying I quit whilst Mick was unconscious. This isn't an easy watch, but it is one hell of a spectacle. Number 6, Mankind vs. The Rock at St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Your House. After having his brain cells rearranged at the Rumble, Foley would win the title back from The Rock at Halftime Heat, essentially a cinematic match 21 years before they became a thing. At some Valentine's Day Massacre, which is named after a real-life massacre, in case you didn't know, Mankind and the Great One went to war again, this time in the first official Last Man Standing match in Fed history. And if you thought they were going to dial down the violence, then brother, you don't know wrestling. Somehow, this match was even more insane than their previous pay-per-view meeting, spilling out of the ring, up the ramp, and into the backstage area. Mick and Rock gave it their all, but it still wasn't enough, and the match ended with an in-sync double chair shot that laid both men down for the counts. Whilst pay-per-view matches ending inconclusively is never preferred, this draw actually fit the story to a T. Here were two perfectly matched rivals who wouldn't quit and couldn't get the other to quit, and the chaos they delivered on this night helped establish the Last Man Standing stipulation as a WWE staple. Number 5. Mankind vs. The Rock on Raw. One night removed from clobbering each other to within an inch of their lives, Mankind and The Rock went to war yet again on Monday Night Raw. I mean, seriously guys, can you just settle this with a friendly game of tiddlywinks? Instead, the World Championship was placed on the line in a ladder match, and even though they didn't need to maim each other to win, that is precisely what they did. I'm seriously running out of ways to describe how future billionaire film star Dwayne Johnson tried to reduce a Santa Claus lookalike to a bloody pulp, so you'll just have to believe me that this was yet another solid argument for why your parents were right to not let you watch wrestling as a kid. More chair shots, more crazy falls off ladders, more of Mick's brain leaking out of his nose, only this time there was more of a focus on drama, more storyline substance to the mayhem, eh? In the end, the recently debuted Paul White cost Mick the title, allowing Rocky to reclaim the belt, setting up his Mania clash with Austin and bringing to a close one of the most brutal rivalries in WWE history. Number 4, The Rock vs. Mankind on Raw. I know this match technically took place in December of 1998, but it didn't air until January 4th, 1999, so don't be a smartass, alright? The Rock and Mankind's bloody storyline began at the previous year's Survivor Series, where Rocky won the world title after Vince McMahon turned his back on the hardcore legend. This set up a title rematch on Raw with the corporation in Rock's corner and good old DX as Mick's backup. In terms of in-ring wrestling, there's not really that much to say here, as the match lasted less than 9 minutes and wasn't all that notable for moves and whatnot. But come on, you know what we're all here for. We are here for that pop. After Ken Shamrock's interference led to a mass brawl between the two groups on the outside, the glass shattered and Stone Cold Steve Austin made his way to the ring to possibly the loudest cheer in WWE history. One chair shot to The Rock later and Foley was the new champion, the crowd going absolutely ballistic all the while. Hey, maybe this is more of a moment than a match, but it's such a great moment that, to be honest, couldn't give a toss. Number 3, Triple H vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin at No Mercy. Did you know there were 2 events called No Mercy in 1999? One normal pay-per-view and one that was exclusive to the United Kingdom. Oh, you did know that. Never mind. Anyway, the US show was main evented by a no-holds-barred clash between Steve Austin and the man who won his first of many WWE championships in 1999, Triple H. Austin and Hunter had been making each other's lives hell, which included Stone Cold sticking an actual rattlesnake on the game. All that tension came to a head here as the fierce rivals began fighting before the bell and did not let up. The challenger took the champion on a lovely tour of the arena, introducing him headfirst into such items as the announce table, the barricade, and the camera crane. Stone Cold was just a month away from being written off TV, but he could still very much go, making for one of the most hellacious fights of the entire year. Botched interference from The Rock eventually handed Trips the win, but he knew he was lucky to have survived a run-in with a pissed-off Stone Cold. Number 2, Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. The Rock at Backlash. What do you do as a wrestling booker when the main event of your biggest show of the year wasn't what it could have been? Well, you just do it better a month later, of course. That is precisely what happened at Backlash 1999, which saw WWE champion Steve Austin defend his title against the man he had beaten at Mania 15, The Rock. With no rules and Shane McMahon as the special guest referee, Austin's back was firmly against the wall, but that is where he thrived. This was essentially the Mania match with everything turned up to 11 as champion and challenger crashed and bashed their way around the arena like 2 rabid wolves tussling over the last piece of meat. Shane's presence only intensified the crowd support for their renegade hero, who somehow managed to hit Rock with a stunner whilst he was filming it on a TV camera. Following more slapstick violence than a drunken pantomime, he hit one final stunner to lay out The Rock, win the match, and leave the building with his smoking skull belt in tow. Oh, and then The Undertaker kidnapped Stephanie McMahon, but that's a story for another time. Number 1, the Hardy Boys vs Edge and Christian at No Mercy. Some wrestling matches are good, some are even great, but every once in a while, a match comes along that changes the business forever. Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys, I will not call them the New Brood, had been competing in the Terry Invitational Tournament, or TIT as Jerry Lawler took great pleasure in saying, for the managerial services of Miss Runnels and a big cash prize. The finals took place at No Mercy, with the bag of loot suspended above the ring in the first ever tag team ladder match. These four weren't exactly superstars before this match, but by the time it was over, everyone knew their names. They absolutely killed it out there, doing spots with ladders that nobody had ever seen before and providing some of the most thrilling duos wrestling that fans had seen in a long time. You can see the blueprints for not just the triangle ladder and TLC matches that would come, but for every tag or multi-person ladder affair that WWE have ever done. Jeff was able to grab the money and win the match, but everyone involved in this masterclass had just secured their own place in wrestling history.